The fact is, Chile happens to be having the most unequal economic disparity in the OECD countries. So whatever the protesters are demanding is fit, but at the same time there has to be a root and branch reform. Chile hasn't seen any kind of massive economic reform from 1990. So just by having these populist measures, by suggesting that we give a 20% hike to the pensioners and we make metro free, is not going to address the underlying economic disparity, inequality that exists in Chile. And that has been going on for almost 30 years now. So the government of Piñera has to do much more than what it has suggested or promised. So this would appear as a kind of window dressing. So it has to be a root and branch economic reform across the board.
And what do you think the government's response says about the ruling elite? Because Sebastián Piñera changed his tone. First he said the country was at war, and then, like you said, he proposed these economic reforms. But what does it say about him and those around him? Some might argue that they're tone deaf. What do you think?
The country has been led by the elites from 1970s onwards, after the fall of Allende's regime, Salvador Allende's regime, Augusto Pinochet after that. Now we have got a kind of right-wing government from 1990s onwards. It hasn't helped, it hasn't brought about the reforms that the Chileans would have expected. So the system undermines the underclass systematically, institutionally, and that has been going on all these years. So there has to be reforms in the health sector, reforms in the education sector, reforms in the sector of employability. Unless and until the government introduces these ones, the largest, the big economic pie is going to be always in the hands of the rich upper class. So there is a massive class divide in Chile which cannot be undermined, and now is the time, perhaps, according to the protesters, to do something about it.
Now, in recent weeks and months, we've seen protests across the region, in Ecuador, Bolivia, Argentina. How do the protests that we're seeing now in Chile compare?
Well, there is something called domino effect. I mean, it's very strange that we are talking about it in 2019. I can think of the revolution that took place in 1968, which started in your country, in France. Then there was a kind of knock-on domino effect that spread all over the world. Indeed, so we can say that there is a kind of link between what is going on in Catalonia, in Hong Kong, in Lebanon, in Bolivia, Ecuador last week, and now in Chile. So yes, there is a certain degree of emphasis on people power. People feel that they have a right to question their government. They are not going to sit there and take it. So they are prepared to die for their cause. And now is the time for getting rid of that hesitancy which had affected the masses for such a long time.